Hello and welcome to another video from the Activism, Influencing and Change programme at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Today we're going to be looking at systems mapping. We'll begin by exploring why activists may want to systems map to help them design more plausible influencing strategies, and we're also going to look at the limits of systems map and why you can never know the entirety of a complex system. We're then going to look at the basics of how to systems map, including how to represent power on your maps and where the boundaries of the system you're looking at may lay. Lastly, we'll examine some top tips for systems mapping, including arguing that it should always be done with a diversity of opinions in the room to help your maps have more nuance and help you capture as much of the system you're trying to change as possible. Before delving into systems mapping, let's just quickly recap what systems thinking is. In the previous video, we argued that the kinds of problems, outcomes, issues, status quos that activists want to address can often be described as wicked. This is because they're embedded in complex systems characterized by a large number of interrelated and interdependent factors. They could be social, normative, economic, political. The key takeaway is that problems are often embedded in complex systems where the solutions are unclear and even the definition of those problems are fiercely debated. As activists, we need a way to stand back and appreciate those systems in their entirety as much as we can. When confronted by complexity, we'd argue that a good place for activists to start is with systems mapping. Systems mapping can help activists to see the relationships and dynamics between the elements of a system that are creating the kinds of wicked problems or status quos they may want to address. It allows activists to stand back and hopefully identify the feedback loops that are creating change within a complex system already, and where power may lay, both the power to create the kinds of change activists want to see, or the power to solidify and entrench those wicked problems. Really, systems mapping is a tool for seeing holes, for standing back and hopefully spotting opportunities for our tactics to influence the systems that we may want to change. As we argued in a previous video, systems are made up of a couple of types of building blocks. On the one hand, we have elements, both tangible and intangible. The tangible elements are those elements of a system that activists can easily see and grasp and that are visible to most of us. They may include ministries, security forces, civil society organisations, companies, features of the terrain, media organisations, buildings. These are all very tangible and quite simple to point to. The intangible elements of a system can include those social and moral norms that we argued are often intimately connected to the wicked problems activists want to address, but we can also include things like policies and ideas and laws amongst these intangible elements. The second important building block of systems are the interconnections between those elements. Here we can subdivide those interconnections into flows of things like resources, money, information, ideas and people, and the relationships between those elements, whether they're enemies or they're allies, whether one governs the other, or they perhaps support them in some way, perhaps through political support or some other kind of perhaps moral support. These are the basic building blocks that systems mappers use in order to map complex systems. And here's an example of a systems map that I produced a few years ago with colleagues. What we were interested in was the complex system that was pushing for a digital ID in Kenya. On the map, you can quite easily identify the tangible elements. They're the big circles, and they include things like ministries, departments of the state, different types of state services, different types of identification state registers and regulatory authorities. There's also private companies on there and civil society organisations, political parties and non-governmental organisations. The arrows between the different elements represent the interconnections. There we've mapped things like flows of research and support, who governs who, flows of digital data, and who credentializes different types of identification that are already afloat in the system. Importantly, what's missing on this systems map are those intangible elements. If we were to improve it, we might start adding those social and moral norms and showing how they're connected to different tangible parts of the system. But you should get the basic idea of what systems mapping entails by looking at this map. For those who are interested, we use a program called Kumu, which is a free digital systems mapping program online. One of the really important aspects to systems mapping is also thinking about power. If you remember, Duncan and I basically argue that two of the key frameworks or foundational ways of thinking that activists might benefit from is an appreciation both for complex systems but also for different types of power and power analysis. So how do we represent power on systems maps? Well, one of the ways you can simply do it is just by changing the size of those elements. In the previous map, the larger elements are the elements that we consider to be more powerful within the system or the Kenyan system producing that drive for digital ID. In order to gauge or measure relative to power, we looked at a whole suite of factors. For ministries, we looked at their budget and who was leading them. For political parties, we looked at their followers and how many votes they were winning. For civil society organisations, we looked at how many advocacy pieces they were producing and their budgets. The point really is that power is always contextually contingent within different systems. No two systems will derive, or elements within no two systems will derive power from exactly the same place or in exactly the same ways. This means to understand the power that elements hold within a system to affect change, activists and influencers need to research those elements and then have debates amongst themselves about the relative power of elements to one another. This is where that detective skills and the research and analysis of activism comes into play. When you've produced a systems map, you might have a diagram or a visualization that looks something like those on this slide. Really, they're quite messy, but don't worry, systems maps are meant to be messy. They're only descriptions of the relationships between elements in the kinds of complex systems that you may want to change. They'll never be complete, accurate representations of reality because no activist organization can ever understand or know all the relationships within a complex system in their entirety. Rather, there are best judgments and guides using research and insights we gather as activists as we try and understand the problems that we want to address. Importantly, they're tools for thinking with our systems maps, and rarely will you want to show them to outsiders, those outside of your campaign or your team or your activist group. Remember, systems mapping is an exercise to help us design more plausible influencing strategies. It shouldn't be a law-like guide that locks us into linear thinking. I just want to end this short video with some top tips for those looking to use systems maps to help them design plausible influencing strategies. Systems mapping, we'd argue, should be done somewhere near the beginning of your strategy design process. It's a tool for getting people around the table and debating the nature of the complex systems producing those wicked or emergent problems. Importantly, systems mapping should be done with a diversity of voices in the room. This is because different people can see different parts of the system and have different perspectives on it, all of which are going to be valuable to you going forward. Together also, you need to agree the feasible boundaries of your system. Ideally, appreciation of complexity should make us think that most things are connected to other things. But for the purpose of systems mapping, we need to draw boundaries, whether they be at the borders of a state or a population group or some kind of region. It's kind of up to you, but you will need to do that to make your systems maps coherent. Another important point is that systems maps can be updated. As you're gaining more information about the complex systems and the elements that make it up, you can change, update and improve your systems maps. Lastly, as mentioned earlier, online tools can be really helpful for systems mapping. They can allow us to work remotely on the same systems map and keep them updated. They can also allow us to analyze the systems maps when it comes time to read them and spot those opportunities for change. This will be the subject of our next video.